So I finally got around to playing Sony's, Disney's, Marvel's Spider-Man, or Spider-Man PS4, as it's more colloquially known as. And yeah, I wanted to talk about it. The main reason why I didn't play it before was because I don't actually own a PS4. I am a broke boy, and I was never really able to justify the purchase of one. But Sony, however, has put it on PS Now, which is their like streaming service, and I was able to stream it to my laptop. And I have to say, just speaking purely to the streaming experience, it worked really well. I couldn't tell the difference between a game that I would be playing on a console or a game that I'd be playing directly from my computer. Like I didn't experience any input lag or anything like that. I would say the only issues that I sometimes had was like the resolution would drop occasionally. Sometimes it would crash, but for the most part it was a pretty smooth experience. I mean, obviously if you own a console, I would recommend streaming it, but if you're like me and you don't own a PS4, streaming it to your computer is a viable option to play a lot of the Sony first party exclusives that you can't get anywhere else. So the gameplay is really good. This game just was an absolute blast to play, pretty much all the way through. I know a lot of people say that it rips off the Arkham franchise, but I don't really agree. It's definitely inspired by it, but it feels considerably different. Spider-Man feels much more agile than Batman. I feel like there's a lot more just movement than in the Arkham games. Because Spider-Man, if he's getting surrounded by a bunch of goons, he can just like jump up and zip away. Obviously, like when you're fighting people, the areas that you're fighting in are generally much bigger than they are in an Arkham game. Because like a guy will be across the side of a building and you can web zip to him. So there's a lot more movement in Spider-Man, and the areas that you do combat in are much bigger. Obviously, that's not counting like the stealth missions. I'm talking about like when you're fighting a bunch of people. And there's also, I mean, you do counter, but it's not the same as in the Batman Arkham games, because you don't you don't press triangle and then Spider-Man will just counter. It's much more. It has much more to do with dodging. So. Like the dodge functionality is clearly inspired by the counterattack in the Arkham games, but dodging in Spider-Man allows you to choose whether or not you want to counter. Like when you dodge a henchman or a punch in the Arkham games, or I mean in Spider-Man, you have the option. Okay, so I can counter him, or I can jump away. Or I can do a whole bunch of other things. When someone's punching you in like a Batman game, you pretty much you have to just counter. And it's just like these little things which just make it different. And I would also say when it comes to the gameplay or the combat in Spider-Man, I actually found myself using a lot of the gadgets during combat. Like way more than I ever did in the Arkham games, because in the Arkham games, like I know like you can use your combat or your gadgets like when you're fighting people, but I honestly never do. I pretty much just bash square and counter, and I'll do like the cape stun whenever I have to, but I generally don't use gadgets. However, I found that in Spider-Man, and I played it on the highest difficulty because I am an epic gamer. I actually found myself needing to use like all of my gadgets to take out all the different henchmen. Like I feel like the Arkham games, and that's kind of one of my complaints about them, even though I do love them, they never really force you to use all your gadgets. And in Spider-Man, it's not that they like told me that, oh, you have to use your gadgets to take these certain people out. But I actually, as I was playing it, I was like, okay, I'm getting my ass kicked. What should I do here? And I found myself feeling the need to use more of my gadgets. Like, all right, you know what? The big guys, I'll just use the web bomb on them, and then I'll punch them until they fall to the ground, and then I'll just web zip them. And then I found the guys with the jetpacks. I was like, okay, these guys are kicking my ass. What can I do to take them out? I'll just use the trip mine, the trip line web gadget, whatever it's called, the one that the one that like when you're in stealth, like the one that will like web zip people to a wall when they run past it. I found that, okay, I can use that on the jetpack guys, and that'll zip them directly to the ground. And the game never like tells you that that to do that, or that's how you should take people out, but I found myself trying to find ways to take them out more efficiently because I felt like I had to, because I was just getting my ass handed to me. And that's the thing that I kind of wish the Arkham games would do. I kind of wish those games would make me feel like I have to use the gadgets. And maybe that's just because this was my first time playing through Spider-Man, and maybe I just wasn't good enough at the combat yet. But I mean, even up to the end of the game, I found myself needing to do these. I found myself needing to use the gadgets, which I've never felt like I had to do during combat in the Arkham games. And of course, we also have the stealth sections, which I would say are probably the weakest parts of Spider-Man gameplay. Especially when you're in like closed quarters, I feel like the stealth just is not intuitive. The Spider-Man's movements in close quarters, it's just not really intuitive. Like when you're punching a bunch of guys and you're zipping around everywhere, the gameplay feels great. But if you're like in closed quarters and you're trying to sneak up behind someone, I always feel like, am I going too fast or am I going too slow? Like it feels like the gameplay is tuned for like speed and constant movement, and sometimes you can't really do that during stealth. I think it's fine when you're like outside in a stealth section and you're just zipping across the area. It feels pretty good then, and especially when you can just like silently take people out from a distance. So where you can like web zip to them, or do like the where like Spider-Man pulls them up with a web. That stealth feels fine. But generally the stealth just doesn't feel good to play. And even when it feels fine, there's not really all that much to it. So definitely when it comes to stealth, I'm gonna have to give the edge to the Arkham games. I don't even know why I'm like comparing it to the Arkham games too much. I didn't intend to do this, I just kind of started doing it. Now, when you're making a Spider-Man game, if nothing else, the one thing that you have to get right is the web swinging. That is like number one. It has to be fun to get to your next objective. And I'm happy to report that in Marvel's Spider-Man, it is absolutely fun to be Spider-Man and swing around New York City. I will say though, and yes, this is very nitpicky, but that's what this review is. I'm trying to go really in depth, I guess. I will say the swinging in Spider-Man is very forgiving. Like, I feel like it's really hard to mess up, because like in other Spider-Man games, I would be like constantly swinging into buildings and stuff, and I would constantly be messing it up. However, there was always a sense of accomplishment whenever I got it right. Like whenever I really figured out the controls and I was able to, be really cool swinging through the city. And I feel like in Web of Shadows, or sorry, I guess I was just thinking of Web of Shadows as like a really satisfying swinging experience. But in Spider-Man PS4, I feel like it never really lets you mess up and is constantly picking you up when you're falling down, when you're swinging. And don't get me wrong, it's still a ton of fun to swing around, and it always looks cool whenever it kind of doesn't let you fail. But I kind of wish that there was more of a that I kind of wish that it would let you fail a bit more than it does. And I feel like if it did that, then when you get it right, then it would just really be all the more satisfying. But anyways, like I said before, it's kind of a nitpick. The swinging is still really fun. You know, it really makes you feel like Spider-Man. I did the IGN thing. It's funny because remember when IGN? Listen, okay. Like, how? I'm about to go on this tangent. Remember when IGN did the whenever they said that Arkham Asylum makes you feel like Batman? So I went to watch their Spider-Man review, and they did it again. Like, do they not have like like the self-awareness? And it's just like, listen, I don't think it's that cringy of a thing to say. Like, it does. It's accurate. It does make you feel like Spider-Man. All right, it does. I think it's a fine thing to say when reviewing the game. But IGN, you have to know that that's a meme, that people are gonna clown on you for it. What's like, why do that again? I don't know. That has nothing to do with my review, but I felt like talking about it anyways. What are you gonna do about it? And of course, this is an open world game, so you're gonna have a lot of like standard open world stuff to do. But I feel like this game, while it's not doing anything new when it comes to that, it does it really well all the same. So, you know, the standard so I would say my favorite open worldy things to do are the collectibles, because in this game you collect backpacks that Peter has abandoned to get the tokens. And so that's nothing new, right? But when you get the backpacks, you get like an item from Peter's past that has like some expository history that Peter talks about whenever you collect it, and all that stuff is like super interesting, and it's a really cool way to sort of build the world out and show that this Peter has a history. And it's just a really cool way to give more background on the world and on Peter himself and on his relationship, in a way where you're also getting where you're also getting resources and tokens, which will then help aid you in building up your upgrades or whatever. And it's just like a really cool way to do it, because, you know, if it was just to get the resources, it would probably be really boring running around and collecting the backpacks. But with the little stories, the little anecdotes that Peter will say when you get them, it makes it like I want to go out and get the backpacks, and when I get the tokens, it then makes it really rewarding. So it's just a really cool way of doing the like open worldy collectible stuff. And then, you know, you have your traditional enemy bases to clear out, which are pretty standard, but there also aren't that many, so it never got annoying to me. Like I always had fun fighting the enemies. However, I would say the one pretty big criticism that I have of them is that I wish I could like choose how I want to tackle them, because when you get to the enemy base, you can take out the first wave stealthily, but then after that, like the enemies come out and they just immediately see you, and that's just kind of annoying because it's like I wish I could opt to take out the whole thing stealthily, or opt to take them all out head on. It's just kind of annoying that they don't give you that option. You also have to like take pictures of landmarks, and there's not really much of a reward to it other than the tokens, but I still think it's pretty fun. I think it's fun to find like real life landmarks and see how they do it in the game. And I also think it's really fun to find like Marvel landmarks. Like you can find the Wakandan embassy, you can find like Avengers Tower and stuff like that. I think there was like Josie's bar from Daredevil, and it's just stuff like that it just made it fun to do. And while there's not like a ton of like history that goes along with it, although it kind of is, like it kind of lets you know that these characters like Black Panther and the Avengers and Doctor Strange and like Daredevil, like they do exist in this universe. So I guess from that perspective, it does help build the world out. But more than that, I just think it's fun to see all the landmarks. You also have like these surveillance towers that they're fine. I always like these things to where like you kind of have to go out and like do a thing in order to build out the map, so that like they don't just give you the map and they don't just tell you where everything is. I kind of like when games force you to do something to build that out, I guess, and that's what the surveillance towers are, and they're fine. The one like open worldy thing that I genuinely did not like were Harry's research stations. These missions, they kind of let us know that Harry's mom has passed away, and they tell us that Norman doesn't appreciate his son. And that like story information is cool, but the missions themselves are just way too tedious. Like they're just flat out not fun. Like they take way too long to do. I don't want to help out the environment. Stop putting this woke SJW propaganda in my Spider-Man game, Insomniac. Yeah. The pigeons, they were fine. They weren't too difficult to catch, and I think Howard's he's a cool dude. I actually wanted to help Howard, as opposed to the environment, which can rot away. You Insomniac and your SJW propaganda, get out of here. The Black Cat thing, it was fine. Honestly, there wasn't really they didn't give us that much story to it. It's just like, oh, Black Cat exists in this universe. Yeah, she's here. She's doing things, but there's nothing really interesting from that perspective. However, unlike the Harry research stations, they were not all that tedious, so I won't mind them too much. You do get a suit for it, which is cool. The Tombstone side mission, it was a side mission that I completed. There's really not much more to say about that one. Yeah, I also liked all the missions where like you have to help out like normal citizens and police officers. Like there was like the Philip mission where you had to find the locations that you took pictures of. There's like a sniper mission where you had to help police officers. There's this one where you had to help a lady, like a bird watcher, who she like saw a crime or whatever. Like all that stuff is cool, and it's just very Spider-Man-y. And they were never really tedious, but it was just fun and charming to be like the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Also, there was also like a Taskmaster mission, which it was like fun enough. Like, it's just that one is a little weird. He's like, "Hey, Spider-Man, do these missions," and it's just like, okay, I guess I'll do them. I feel like that's a little immersion breaking when like when like the villain is like, "Here are these challenge maps for you to do." All right, Taskmaster. Even though I get it that it was so that he could like see it was so that like he could see how Spider-Man moves to learn his moves or whatever. But it was still a little weird. Also, screw Taskmaster because he beat me once, and I didn't like how it was like canon that he beat me. Cause then you have to like do another challenge mission to have him respawn, so that's annoying. That it's canonical in my playthrough that Taskmaster beat me. But yeah, whatever. Taskmaster was fine. Oh yeah, I almost forgot. What's it called? Screwball. That one was just stupid. Honestly, I just don't like Screwball as a character. It's just this like, it just oozes of like boomers writing the script being like, oh yeah, we gotta have like a Gen Z villain who does everything for social media clout, and it's just kind of annoying. But yeah, overall the like open world stuff, where the like collectibles and the side missions, they're not too bad. I would say it's done better than like most open world games, to where there's not too much of it. And, like, I feel like I can do it all without having to pull my hair out, because a lot of times in open world games, I'll be because I mean, I don't want to like diagnose myself, but I get like kind of like an OCD to where like I feel like I have to do everything. And then a lot of times while I'm doing everything, I just get bored with the game and then I just stop playing. It happened with Horizon Zero Dawn, to where like I felt like I had to do everything, but and then I just got overwhelmed, and so I stopped playing it. But with this, it's not too much. Like, even if you're like that, you're not gonna have too much of a problem doing everything. Like, the game, it doesn't overstay its welcome. So, good job, Insomniac, on that front. Oh yeah, and the crimes, I forgot to talk about them. They're fine. They're fun. I don't know about you guys, but I always stopped for every crime just because I felt like I wasn't Spider-Man if I didn't stop for every crime. So it did get a little tedious having to stop for the crimes, but I guess I don't want to put it on the developers too much, because you're probably like, you're not supposed to stop for every crime. Although there are like I guess to get all the like crime tokens, there's like a specific number of crimes that you have to do in each district. So, but I don't know. They probably didn't expect people to stop for every crime, but I felt like Spider-Man would stop for every crime, so I should do. Also, I think definitely the thing that made doing all of like the open worldy things better was having J. Jonah Jameson having his podcast randomly play. Like, he's basically the Alex Jones of the Marvel Universe. He's endlessly talking trash about Spidey, and like, I like how he's commenting on the things that happen in the game. It's like, it's so good. It's just so good. Yeah, that's like, that definitely makes, the swinging around the city never feel tedious, and it makes like, doing stuff like finding all the backpacks, it makes it not feel tedious, because you're always gonna have J. Jonah Jameson talking trash about the stuff that you do. And apparently as well, so I always stop for all the crimes, but apparently, like, if you don't stop for all the crimes, then like J. Jonah Jameson like someone will call into his podcast and be like, "Hey, I saw Spider-Man swing by a mugging," and it's just stuff like that the game does that I think is really cool. The boss fights are also pretty good. Like you have the Kingpin boss fights, and he's just basically like a big henchman. But I guess you fight him before you ever encounter a big henchman. And you kind of have to pick off his henchmen and then web him up to beat him up. And I would say it probably goes on a bit too long, and it ends up feeling kind of repetitive. But it's generally fine. Tombstone was pretty much the same thing, because I think like once you inject him with a serum or whatever, then you're able to like fight him like properly. Taskmaster's cool in the way in that like it makes you like think about like what it's kind of like the Mr. Freeze boss fight, which I really love, in that like it kind of makes you go like, oh, I can't do the same thing again. What can I do that's new to beat him? Yeah, Taskmaster was fine. The Mr. Negative, you fight him like 2 times, I think, and the first time you fight him, it's like in the dream world, and it kind of just feels like the Ra's al Ghul boss fight, where like you're in like a dream world and you're fighting a bunch of like ethereal beings. And I think you have a Mr. Negative boss fight like that. I think you do have it like twice in the game. And there is this like kind of cool bit on the train where it kind of feels like a rhythm game, but in a good way, where you have to like dodge his his like strikes. And I think near the end of the game you have another boss fight with him where it kind of feels like a blending of those two like of those two types of Mr. Negative boss fights, to where you're kind of fighting him in the dream world, but then you also have to incorporate the sort of gameplay style while you're fighting him on the train. And yeah, the Mr. Negative boss fights were generally pretty fun. I also like when you have to fight the members of the Sinister Six, because you have to fight them in duos, and that's genuinely pretty cool. Like, I like how you have to keep track of 2 of them at the same time. So like the first duo that you have to fight is Electro and Vulture, and you have to web up Electro to beat him down, and you have to like throw Vulture's wings back at him to stun him, and just balancing the 2 bosses are really cool, and just a ton of fun. And yeah, that was like a boss fight that kind of took me by surprise. I was like, oh, I have to fight both of them at the same time. Whoa. The first Scorpion boss fight, while the Mr. Negative boss fight felt like the boss fight in Arkham City when you're like fighting like the giant Ra's al Ghul and you have to fight like the sand people. The first like Scorpion boss fight just kind of feels like the trials from Arkham City, where like you have to like glide through the dream world, except in this one you're like web zipping through the dream world. I feel like it got annoying like the 3rd time you go under, and you have to do it again. Like when you have to do it the 3rd time, it kind of got annoying. But it's not too bad. When you fight Scorpio and Rhino at the same time, again, pretty fun. You have to use the environment to stun Rhino, and that was pretty fun trying to figure that out. And you basically just use your gadgets to stun Scorpion. I really like that you could get Rhino to run into Scorpion. Like it's just like it's really cool that that you really could use a lot of the environment, and you could I like that you could think, I wonder if Rhino will run into Scorpion. And I like that like it doesn't tell you, right? And just trying it out and seeing it work, it's just really fun gameplay. Oh, I forgot to talk about there's an Electro boss fight. That was fine. You know, it's pretty standard boss fights where like, oh, you can't attack the villain. You have to break through his barrier, or you have to wait until he's like tired out, and then you can fight him. You know, that was a pretty fun one. But yeah, the final boss fight is with Dr. Octopus, and it's probably the best one. Of course, you fight him on top of the Oscorp building, and I feel like they do a good job with the camera and with the music and just with everything that's going on, because it just feels really cinematic. Honestly, I was a bit confused. I feel like you were supposed to like throw back rubble that he threw at you, but I mostly just used my electric webs. And I think you could use your regular webs as well, but I'm not really sure. But yeah, I mostly just use my electric webs to stun him and then punch him. And then he'll like electrify the ground, which will force you to swing around. And then that's when I threw pieces of rubble back at him. And you go through that cycle for a bit, and then a cutscene will transition you to like the final phase of the battle, which takes place on the side of the building. And this whole thing is just visually awesome and really cinematic. And you know, then you kind of have to dodge around and then counter him. And yeah, it's just overall a really good boss fight to end the game with. And you know, it would not be a Spider-Man game without chases. And they're pretty good. They're pretty standard Spider-Man game chases. But they can feel pretty cinematic. And they're interspersed with like QTEs, which I personally don't mind QTEs, but I know some people don't like them. But they're overall just kind of samey. Like, you know, I've chased a villain before in a Spider-Man game. However, I don't mind them, and the swinging mechanic is obviously good. So I never really got frustrated during a chase scene like I have in other Spider-Man games. Also, I really love the upgrades and reward system within this game. And it's just like done really well, because pretty much everything that you're doing in the game, you get rewarded with like upgrades for your moves, upgrades for your gadgets, or upgrades for your suits. Or like, you know, the suits are the reward. And it just all comes together really well, because whether you're doing a side mission stuff or you're doing the lab puzzle things, whether you're stopping a crime, whether you're doing like the research stations or whatever, it all helps. It's all rewarding. There's always like a tangible reward to what you're doing. You're not just doing it to do it. And it's a notable thing to talk about in the AAA games industry, because you know, a lot of times you'll be able to pay for a suit, or you'll be able to pay for you know, to unlock new abilities or whatever. And yeah, and that's the thing. Like a lot of people, they'll say like, oh, you know, microtransactions are fine if it's just cosmetic. But no, like, unlocking suits in Spider-Man, it was part of the gameplay. It made playing the game more rewarding, because I have this tangible reward for doing a lot of the side content. So it's just I just appreciate that that it was done the way that it was, and that there were no microtransactions, there were no, you know, DLC packs for the suits. It's all just done really well. And it is quite sad that that's a thing that I feel like I should compliment the game on, because it should just be how games are. But this is the state of the AAA games industry. So that's the Spider-Man gameplay. The Mary Jane stealth sections, they're pretty boring. It's just less fun to play as like a normal human. Whereas I felt like the Miles stealth section initially, I felt like it was actually pretty good, because I feel like that stealth section helps ground the story. Like, it shows what regular people experience when these superpowered people are fighting. I actually thought it was like pretty fun, playing as Miles trying to avoid Rhino. Like, that's just a fun concept to employ. But the Mary Jane stealth sections, it's just like sneaking around other people, and it's just very uninteresting. And again, that's not to say that I don't mind it when the game slows down. Like, I think one of the best missions is the one when you investigate one of Fisk's warehouses with Officer Davis. F's in the comment section for Officer Davis, by the way. I think the dialogue between them is really well written, and I enjoy seeing Spider-Man working directly with a regular police officer, like I mentioned before. It's a mission where things slow down, but the content still remains interesting. And I like the one where you have to track down your flash drive at the incinerator because you were evicted. It's such a Spider-Man thing that would happen, and it's great. And yeah, like, that's the thing. Like, the game slowed down, but the content was still interesting. I can't say the same for the Mary Jane stealth missions. I will say though, the one where you're in the Osborn penthouse, that's the point where there's a lot of lore revealed about what actually happened to Harry, and that was pretty interesting. But there was still a lot of sneaking around just people, which is not interesting. And so that is the gameplay. But what Insomniac Spider-Man also excels at is the story, which is just as good. Now, it's really nothing unique for a Spider-Man story, but I feel like this game is just such a testament to the fact that it's really all about the execution, because this story is executed phenomenally. I really love this iteration of Peter Parker. He's 23 years old, and he's been Spider-Man for 8 years. So, just right off the bat, it's a completely different take from the version in the MCU, which is good, because at no point did I think, oh, this is just a knockoff of the MCU Spider-Man, unlike a certain other game, which we won't talk about. And Spider-Man is just like Peter. He's just a really good dude who I found myself rooting for. Like, he's really down on his luck and he's struggling financially, but I really like that. It's because he's taken a low-wage job with Otto Octavius. And the reason why he took it was because he's actually doing important work to help people. It just makes his character all the more endearing, and it really makes you root for him. And, listen, it's another Otto Octavius story, so the second you see him, you know what's going to happen, but it's still executed really well. And, at some point he's going to go crazy and become Otto Octavius, but they, or Dr. Octopus, but they do a really good job of making you not want to see the turn. They, you really become attached to, or you really begin to like Peter and Otto's relationship, and you really want to see them continue their work. But his lab ends up getting shut down by Norman, and he has this like degenerative disease that is making him lose control over his limbs. So it's genuinely heartbreaking to see these things just continue to chip away at him and make him go over the edge. And what I really liked about this was that it really is just him going over the edge. Like, sure, maybe the arms like enhance his vengeful mindset, but it's already there. Even without the chip connected to his neck, like Otto would still take this turn. And that's kind of one of the things that I didn't like about Spider-Man 2 was that, it was just the arms making him go crazy. Like, nah, man, this version of Otto Octavius, it's just a guy who's been kicked down so many times and he just can't take it anymore. And it's a really well-written and genuinely heartbreaking turn of events with Doc Ock. Mr. Negative, he's pretty good. Honestly, he was kind of a fake out for the trailers where they made you think that he was going to be the main villain. But I feel like they kind of just like put him to the wayside in the game. Like, he's okay. Like, I like him, or you end up liking him. You end up liking his relationship with Peter and Aunt May, but I feel like that it's just not as well done as Otto, because where Otto has this like really expertly crafted decline, with Mr. Negative, you kind of just figure it out through like watching like tapes of him and like reading his diary or his journal or whatever. And, it's just not as well done. But it's still pretty good. And you also have Norman, who, like, I will say, like, while I was playing the game, I was kind of wondering if they were going to leave Otto for the next game. And I was kind of thinking the same of Norman. I'm like, okay, are they going to do the thing in this game? Or are they going to leave it for another game? And obviously they left it for another game. But Norman was also really well done as well. He's like he's a ruthless businessman, of course, that you end up hating. However, there are like actually layers to him. You learn that the Devil's Breath was actually supposed to be a cure for Harry's illness. So like you learn that he's not just a ruthless businessman. He is a ruthless businessman who was unable to save his wife, but will go to any lengths necessary to save his son. And it's just like a really he's just like a really good villain, because you kind of get where he's coming from. And yeah, like what's great about these villains is that they're not like one-note villains. They have motivations for why they're doing them, or why they're doing the bad things that they're doing. Like even the Sinister Six, like at first they just kind of come off as like, oh, we're just here because we hate Spider-Man and we want to kill Spider-Man. And granted, it's not done in the most in the most like subtle of ways, but when you go into their base or whatever, you can listen to Otto's like he like left behind these little messages for them, and you kind of find out that they're the main reason why they're doing this is because Otto has promised to cure them of the horrible, I guess, diseases, which are their superpowers. Or not diseases, but you know what I mean. Well, actually, in Vulture's case, it is a disease, because what was it? Or not even a disease, but I think his spine was broken? Or did he get some kind of cancer from the wings? I don't remember entirely, but basically, Otto promised to cure them for their conditions. And yeah, and so like yeah, even though they don't spend a ton of time with the Sinister Six, like actually developing them as proper villains, they still do a little. They give you a little bit of a motivation for them. And but honestly, I'm actually kind of okay with the villains not not having like their proper arcs being told in the game, because I like that these are just a recurring cast of villains. I like that Spidey has a history, that he's already fought Rhino and Electro and Vulture and like all these different people, and like Kingpin. Like I think it's pretty cool that there is this history, that there's this lived-in world that we're jumping into. And I also loved like Peter's cast of friends and family that that he has relationships with. While I didn't love the Mary Jane stealth missions, I actually did like the character. In the Raimi movies, she was just like this damsel in distress, but in this game, she's much more of an actual character. She's like a reporter who helps fight the bad guys in her own way. Like Peter does end up saving her like once in the game, but it's because she's like trying to find information and stuff. And so I like that she's given more to do, and she is her own character and not just like this plot device that's used to have Peter fight the villain. And like when her and Peter fight, it's not because Peter can't make her fucking opera or whatever. It's because he doesn't want her helping him more. And it's this thing where like, even though Peter is right, you shouldn't be sneaking into a goddamn Sable base, MJ. It's still nice to see her be more of her own character, and it's nice to see like their arguments be for something like refreshing and new, And yeah, I really like this interpretation of Mary Jane. I also like Miles. He's definitely the character that helps ground the game. The loss of his father reminds you that there are stakes to all of these these super heroics that you're constantly doing throughout the game. I love that the death of Officer Davis. I think it happened like right after that like really big helicopter chase scene where you have to stop this helicopter from crashing into the ground. I love that like right after that you have to play as Miles, and you see his father die, and I love how after like this epic sequence, you get this really grounded sequence with Miles. And I also really like the mentor-mentee relationship between him and Peter. It's definitely like a parallel of Peter and Otto, except hopefully, Peter doesn't go crazy. And yeah, I'm really interested to see where they take Miles in the future. I wonder if we'll get to play as Miles in the next game. I mean, you'd have to think that that's what's gonna happen. Yeah, I don't know if. I wonder if maybe the next game will be like, I don't know if you'll have the choice or if they'll force you to play as Miles sometimes. We'll see. But I like that Miles was in the game. He definitely didn't overtake the movie. It's definitely still a Peter Parker game. But he was a nice addition. I also thought Aunt May was pretty good. I liked her relationship with Peter, and I actually almost cried when she died because of the position that it put Peter in. It was genuinely heartbreaking to see him make the choice to sacrifice his aunt in order to save the city. And I definitely wasn't expecting them to kill Aunt May, and that was pretty ballsy decision. Oh yeah, I forgot. There's also Yuri. She's also in the game. I didn't forget her because I didn't like her. I thought she was actually a really good kind of Commissioner Gordon-esque character. I've never seen her before in any iteration of Spider-Man. I'm assuming she's a character in the comics, but I've never seen her in any of the cartoons or anything. But I thought she was a really cool character. I like that Spider-Man has I guess a friend outside of Peter Parker, because or I guess technically Mary Jane as well, and now Miles. But throughout this game, it was basically just Mary Jane. But actually, I guess before the game started, he didn't really have Mary Jane as a friend. So I liked that Yuri was kind of there to be Spider-Man's friend, and their interactions were always really funny. But yeah, they don't really do much with Yuri. She's just kind of there for most of the game. So, but she's pretty fun. Yeah, and I mean, honestly, you also have to give it up for the performances, especially the voice acting, of course. And I think you can call them performances, right? Because I'm pretty sure the voice actors also did like the performance capture. I don't know. I'm pretty sure they do. I mean, I haven't like seen any of like the behind the scenes, but either way, the voice acting is definitely phenomenal. What a crazy thing that apparently they did was Yuri Lorenthal, I think is his name, the guy who voices Peter. He recorded like all of his dialogue twice because he has a one set of dialogue where he's out of breath while you're fighting or swinging, and then he has another set of dialogue for when you're standing still. And that's insane. That's actually crazy. But more than that, it's all just really good. Like he captures Peter Parker so well, and his delivery is really good. Like Spider-Man's a character, especially when he's like making quips, where he can get annoying really easily, but I think the jokes were genuinely pretty funny, and I think his delivery is also what sells it. And in all the dramatic scenes with Doc Ock, their whole dynamic is just really well done. And like that final scene when Peter like he says like he like starts screaming at him, saying like, "You knew, you son of a bitch." He doesn't actually say that last bit, but like it was genuinely really powerful. And yeah, just really good voice acting all around. As far as post-game content goes, I basically did everything, like most of the side missions, and I got most of the tokens and collectibles before I finished the game. So there wasn't really a ton for me to do in terms of post games. I basically just did kind of the stuff, like the leftover stuff for the trophies, like getting all the suits and stopping all the crimes and getting better scores on the challenges. But I didn't really have much to do post game. It was pretty cool that J. Jonah Jameson, even after the game, there was still more of his podcast to listen to, so that was pretty fun. But yeah, I didn't really have much to do post game. Overall, Sony's, Disney's, Marvel's Spider-Man, or Spider-Man PS4, as it's more colloquially known, is a pretty close to perfect Spider-Man game. The small quibbles that I may have had with it is dwarfed by the absolute blast I had playing it. It is Marvel's Arkham Asylum. It is the game that has shown what a Marvel game can be. It shows that we don't have to settle for a fun action game when it comes to superheroes. We can and should expect more from superhero video games. Goodbye.